Welcome, we're joined by political analyst and CivilNet host, Eric Hacopian. Eric, thank you very much for your time.
It's a pleasure.
So to start off, what happened today? Was it a military coup? Was it an attempted coup, or what was it? The Prime Minister has said it was an attempted coup, but some opposition figures have been saying it wasn't. What do you think?
Well, from a very technical standpoint, when military leaders call for the civilian leadership of the country, which they are subservient to by law, to resign or leave office, that is technically a coup. But as anything in this country, everything is done in a different and unique way. So it's not your typical Turkish style, the radio stations are seized, it's nothing like that. So it's really how it plays out, we will see over the next couple of days. Because if this thing doesn't go anywhere for the next couple of days, it could very well be that the Army General Chief of Staff is simply another group to be joined by diaspora groups or the president or church leaders asking for the Prime Minister to resign and have no more effect than that. So time will tell. So in a very technical sense, legalistic sense, it's a coup attempt. But realistically, I mean, it smells a lot more like normal politics. We had two significant sized rallies. The Prime Minister had his own march and rally, and the opposition had theirs. They were all separated from each other. It was all peaceful. So, I mean, the Prime Minister's rally was certainly larger, but the opposition was significant also as far as the number of people that came out. But, so in a technical sense, you could say it's a coup attempt, but what it really means in practical terms is really hard to say at this point.
And you mentioned many people have already called for the Prime Minister to resign, but don't you think there's a particular significance of the Chief and the Deputy Chief of the General Staff of the Armed Forces doing so?
Well, yes, obviously. This was triggered by his dismissal of the General of Staff and the Deputy Chief of Staff of the Army. If the Army was that interested in him leaving, they were not interested in him leaving prior to the Army Chief of Staff and the Deputy being dismissed. So obviously there's very specific things at play here. We don't really know what those specific things are. I think this could be very well that we're starting to get the impact of the political impact on the Army of the failure in the war. Because so far they've gotten away pretty much scot-free. There has not been too many finger pointing, there has not been any blame game within the Army itself of people taking responsibility. And as we know, right now there's more than 1,000 cases, mostly targeting the Army, that involves dereliction of duty, it involves corruption, and in some cases espionage. So if you wanted the government to go, are you doing this because you don't want those cases to come to light? Or are you doing it as a matter of principle? And that's for the residents and voters here to decide, and not for us to speculate on.
And when the Homeland Salvation Movement called for the rally at 3 p.m. by the Opera House, and the Prime Minister called for another rally at the Republic Square, many people were worried that there was a potential for violence, but so far there hasn't been any violence.
Not at all. They were quite peaceful. The Prime Minister, I listened to his speech partially.
What did you think of the speech?
Listen, he's the master of the street. He's the master populist politician. For all of his faults and all of his failings, or whatever you think of him, when it comes to a match between him and the opposition, just his phraseology, the way he talks, the way he painted the story that this is an attempt it's an attempt at a restoration by the elite and by corrupt forces of reactionary forces. So he sort of put himself in the light of being the progressive populist person who's in line with the average person, while this is an inside elite type coup attempt. So he masterfully set up the opposition and lined them up with the worst people in the country. The thing with him is his basic populist instincts are exceptionally sound. And I think the problem for the opposition is if this struggle becomes a struggle on the street, they will lose to him because one, he's a singular leader who actually has a following. It's certainly not the following he had. And he's frankly far better at this than the other side is. And the other side is, for the most part, the geriatric crowd that is not in tune with the public. And you can just see it in the two rallies. The opposition rally was overwhelmingly male and older, while the Pashinyan one was younger and very diverse in who showed up. So if this thing becomes a battle of the street, he'll always win that war.
Did you see any difference between the Pashinyan of today? Do you think maybe there's been a change now? He was talking, for example, about the end of the velvet aspect of the revolution. What did you think about that?
Well, I mean, he has this populist tendency to go to the edge and sort of threaten, I'm going to be rougher and no more Mr. Nice Guy. And he did that after the war, and it's almost always silly and stupid. But he always implies that, and it's just one of the reasons that those sort of the elite people hate him, is because he plays this populist card and he'll say things that other people won't, but that plays to his crowd, and he knows the language of his crowd, and his base is very man of the street, working class, and rural. It's frankly much more so than people in elite circles here. So he plays to that crowd, and he'll say things like that. The other thing that he mentioned is that he sort of came close to saying we should have elections without saying so. But we'll get to that later.
So my next question would be that. I mean, what's next now? He spoke about possible elections as well during his speech.
What he said in his speech is that I tried to have conversations about elections, and the opposition rejected it. And there's some truth to that, because at some point they said you should leave without elections, and then they say they want elections, and then one faction of them wants elections, another faction of them doesn't want elections. Like Kocharyan has said, I want elections, while the Vasquez Manoukian said they don't want elections. So he's right about that. And what he said, which was actually encouraging, is that he's willing to open up dialogue to have elections. Ultimately, this impasse needs to be broken. This impasse needs to be broken peacefully, democratically, and the way to do that is to have elections. And whoever wins, wins. That's what we need. And I think I've been very critical of him with this, is he needs to broaden his base. You either hold elections or you broaden your base, because he certainly does not command overwhelming support of the country. He has more supporters than anybody else, but he does not have the overwhelming support that he has. And what we need is new elections. And on the other hand, I think this move by the Army Chief General Staff should be condemned across the board. That's not something that we need. But at the same time, Pashinyan is not faultless here. He takes provocative actions. He says everything that comes to his mind, and that's not how you behave. You campaign in poetry and you govern in prose. He never moves to prose. It's always this populist game that he plays. So he makes provocative moves and actions that are not thought out, and they're not helpful. So even if we were to condemn the army for this move and to say as a matter of principle that they're wrong and this should not happen, that does not leave Pashinyan off the hook, because he is responsible for a certain amount of this moment. And he needs to become a leader for the whole country and not be the revolutionary populist rabble-rouser. That's already passed. We've passed that moment.
Well, Eric, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And keep following CivilNet for the latest updates on today's events.